Humans can survive without many things. You can survive without comfort, without wealth, without entertainment. People have endured freezing winters, starvation, isolation, and unimaginable pain. But there is one thing that human beings seem unable to live without for very long: meaning. And when meaning disappears, people don't always die physically. Sometimes something else dies first. In 1944, inside a Nazi concentration camp, psychiatrist Viktor Frankl noticed something that terrified him. The prisoners who lost all sense of purpose often died long before their bodies gave out. Not from disease, not from starvation, but from something harder to describe. They simply stopped fighting to stay alive. Frankl would later write that the people most likely to survive were not necessarily the strongest. They were the ones who still had a reason to see tomorrow. A child waiting at home, a book left unfinished, a promise they intended to keep. The human body, it seemed, could endure almost anything, as long as the mind believed there was a purpose behind the suffering. For centuries, philosophers treated meaning as an abstract idea, something spiritual, something optional. But modern science has started asking a much stranger question. What if meaning isn't a luxury at all? What if the human brain evolved to need it in the same way it needs food, sleep, and social connection? And if that's true, what happens when an entire society begins to lose it? To understand that question, we need to go back hundreds of thousands of years. Because for almost all of human history, nobody had to search for meaning. It was already waiting for them. A hunter-gatherer waking up 50,000 years ago knew exactly why they existed. The tribe needed food. Children needed protection. The elderly needed care. Every person had a role. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have repeatedly found the same pattern. People are rarely isolated from communal responsibilities. Everyone contributes in some way. The skilled hunters provide meat. The gatherers bring plants and medicine. Storytellers preserve traditions. Elders teach younger generations. Even children are gradually introduced into meaningful participation, long before adulthood. Life was difficult, but it was never directionless. You woke up knowing who needed you, and perhaps more importantly, who you needed in return. Evolution rewarded this. Human beings are one of the most cooperative species on Earth. Unlike most animals, our survival depended on occupying social roles within increasingly complex groups. People who contributed to the tribe survived. People who found meaning in service passed on their genes. Over thousands of generations, the human brain adapted to expect something fundamental: the expectation that your existence matters to other people. And when that expectation breaks, strange things begin to happen. One of the most disturbing examples ever recorded happened inside a laboratory in Maryland. In 1968, behavioral scientist John Calhoun created what he called a paradise for mice. Unlimited food, unlimited water, perfect temperature. No predators, no disease, no threats of any kind. The population exploded, and then it collapsed. The mice stopped reproducing. Mothers abandoned their young. Males withdrew from social life entirely. Some spent their days eating, sleeping, and grooming themselves obsessively. Calhoun called them the beautiful ones, perfectly healthy on the outside, functionally absent on the inside. For decades, people interpreted the experiment as proof that comfort destroys civilizations. But Calhoun himself disagreed. He believed something far more important had vanished: meaningful roles. The population had grown faster than the social structure could support. There were more individuals than there were purposes for those individuals to fulfill. The young inherited a world where every position was already occupied. Nothing depended on them. And eventually, they stopped participating altogether. Calhoun called this the first death, the death of the spirit. The body followed years later. Humans are not mice. Our societies are infinitely more complex. But Calhoun believed the underlying principle remained the same. If meaningful roles disappear faster than new ones are created, psychological collapse becomes increasingly likely. And modern neuroscience suggests he may have been onto something. The human brain is not simply wired for pleasure. It is wired for pursuit. Researchers studying dopamine once believed it was the chemical of happiness. But that's not what dopamine actually does. Dopamine motivates action toward meaningful goals. It is anticipation, movement, the expectation that what you are doing matters and leads somewhere important. When scientists artificially stimulate dopamine systems in animals, the results are surprising. The animals don't necessarily enjoy themselves more. They simply become more willing to work toward objectives. The reward isn't the destination. It's the sense that there is a destination at all. Human beings appear to function in much the same way. Psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan developed what they called self-determination theory. Their research identified three fundamental psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. People need to feel that their choices matter, that they are capable of doing meaningful things, and that those things connect them to others. When these needs are met, well-being increases dramatically. When they are absent, depression, anxiety, and apathy become more common. Meaning, in other words, is not just philosophical, it is neurological, and this creates a strange paradox. By almost every material measurement, modern humans live better than their ancestors ever did. We have unlimited entertainment, instant communication, climate-controlled homes, food from every corner of the planet. Many of the struggles that defined human existence for thousands of years have disappeared. And yet rates of loneliness, depression, and existential dissatisfaction continue to rise across much of the developed world. People often describe feeling lost, disconnected, as though something important is missing, even when all their material needs are satisfied. Perhaps the problem isn't that life has become too easy. Perhaps the problem is that life has become too abstract. For most of human history, your contribution was visible. You could see the shelter you helped build, the food you helped gather, the children you helped raise. Your actions produced immediate evidence that your existence mattered. Today, many people spend entire days moving information between screens, performing tasks whose larger purpose feels increasingly difficult to understand. The social roles still exist, but their psychological clarity has faded, and human beings evolved in a world where meaning was concrete. Viktor Frankl understood this better than almost anyone. After surviving the Holocaust, he developed a form of psychotherapy called logotherapy. Its central idea was radically simple. The primary human drive is not pleasure. It is not power. It is meaning. People can endure suffering if that suffering serves a purpose. Without purpose, even comfort can become unbearable. Frankl believed meaning could be found in three places: through work, through love, and through the attitude we choose toward unavoidable suffering. What mattered was not the specific source. What mattered was having something beyond yourself to serve. Modern research has repeatedly supported this idea. Studies have found that people with a strong sense of purpose tend to live longer. They recover more effectively from illness. They experience lower rates of depression and cognitive decline. Purpose appears to influence not only psychological health, but physical health as well. The exact mechanisms are still debated, but the pattern is difficult to ignore. Human beings seem to thrive when they believe their lives are part of something larger than individual comfort. And perhaps that should not surprise us. After all, the human story has always been a collective one. Civilizations were built by people who planted trees whose shade they would never sit under. Cathedrals took generations to complete. Parents spent their lives preparing children for futures they themselves would never see. Meaning has always involved a kind of transcendence, the willingness to participate in something bigger than the self. But modern life increasingly encourages the opposite. Algorithms personalize reality. Entertainment arrives instantly. Individual preference becomes the organizing principle of existence. And while freedom is extraordinary, it carries an unexpected burden. For the first time in human history, millions of people must construct meaning almost entirely on their own. Nobody tells them what their role is. Nobody tells them what deserves sacrifice. Nobody tells them why tomorrow matters. The freedom our ancestors dreamed about has become, for many people, an overwhelming responsibility. And perhaps this explains why the question of meaning feels more urgent today than ever before. Because meaning isn't something the universe simply hands to us. It is something human beings continuously create together. John Calhoun spent the rest of his life searching for ways to prevent the collapse he had witnessed among the mice. He believed the solution lay in what he called ideational space, the creation of new purposes, new identities, new forms of contribution that could expand faster than populations themselves. In other words, the answer was not to return to the past. It was to keep inventing new reasons to participate in the human story. Maybe that has always been our greatest skill. Not tool-making, not language, but the ability to imagine futures worth working toward. The ability to believe that our actions matter even when the rewards lie decades beyond our own lives. Humans can survive without many things, but perhaps we cannot survive without the conviction that our existence means something to someone. That somewhere, in ways both large and small, the world would be different if we had never been here. And maybe meaning was never a luxury. Maybe it was one of the oldest survival mechanisms our species ever evolved. A force as real as hunger, as ancient as fire, as necessary as the stories our ancestors once told beneath the stars. Because the people who came before us always knew something we are only beginning to rediscover. A human life is not sustained merely by what it consumes. It is sustained by what it serves.